Good morning and welcome to the 27th meeting of the Constitution Europe External Affairs and Culture Committee in 2025. Today we've received apologies from Keith Brown and Alistair Allen is attending today's meeting as a substitute. Our first agenda item is to decide whether to consider our draft pre-budget scrutiny 26-27 funding for culture report in private at future meetings. Are we all agreed? Thank you. Our next item on today's agenda is to take evidence from Historic Environment Scotland. Before we begin, a gentle reminder to members that the committee does not have a role in the operational decisions of Historic Environment Scotland. This morning we are joined by Sir Mark Jones, the Chair, and Andrew Davis, Board Member of Historic Environment Scotland. A warm welcome to you both, and can invite Sir Mark Jones to make a brief opening statement before we move to questions.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me to be here this morning. As you know, I started as Chair of Historic Environment Scotland about a month ago. And as you know also, it's a part-time appointment, 1 or 2 days a week, and it's non-executive. Government guidance emphasises that board members have no authority to instruct the Chief Executive or any member of staff on operational matters. And I just mention this by way of kind of excusing myself if you find that I'm not fully informed on every aspect of HES's operations. But I'm very pleased to have been given this responsibility, if at the same time rather daunted by it. We in Scotland are, I think, very fortunate to live in a country where many aspects of our past are made present to us by and in the historic buildings we encounter every day and the great archaeological sites which speak to us of life thousands of years ago. Elsewhere in the world, for example in China, we see the wholesale destruction of historic buildings and the consequent, and I think now regretted, loss of that link. In many European countries, we see over-restoration, which turns what was authentic into something which now seems false. Historic Scotland did, and Historic Environment Scotland continues to do, a great job in protecting historic buildings from both such fates and informing and educating people about them. Archaeological sites, under threat in many parts of the world, are here meticulously recorded, archived, and where necessary, protected by HES, which provides a lead to the whole archaeological community in Scotland. When it comes to tourism, Historic Environment Scotland is responsible not only for some of our most visited and genuinely iconic buildings and sites, but also for hundreds of lesser-known monuments and structures, often in less visited parts of Scotland, which help drive the tourism economy and so bring visitors and jobs. I mention these aspects of HES's work because I want to emphasise that even during this troubled period, it should be remembered that HES has many dedicated and experienced staff who are doing a great job. But that is not to deny that we have problems. Clearly we do, and they need to be tackled. I certainly don't yet, and probably will never have all the answers. But my aim is to do my part in returning Historic Environment Scotland to a situation in which the board and the senior management are seen to be effective leaders of an organisation that is able to concentrate on doing a much-needed and widely appreciated job. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You mentioned the troubled period that you're in at the moment, and it's been played out in the press and media as well. But can I ask you what you see are the main challenges, and how are these challenges going to be addressed by yourself?
Well, at the moment, one of the main challenges is that we have a lack of leadership. And one of the actions which I have proposed we take is to bring in an interim chief operating officer for a 6-month period to help us with that problem. And that's a process which is just getting underway now and which I hope will be complete in the next month or so. So that's one step. I mean, clearly there are other steps which are needed. I think very important is that a series of investigations into grievances of various kinds are underway, and they need to be concluded, and then the right action needs to follow on from that. And I'm satisfied that that is happening, but it isn't the work of an instant, because there are proper procedures to be gone through, and we must make sure that those are observed. But again, I'm hopeful that that will be concluded in many of them. Most of them, I think, will be concluded in the next month or two.
Can I ask about relationships in general with the staff? Obviously, the Scottish Government's very promoting within its organisations the Fair Work agenda. So this will have had an impact on the morale in general of the staff. How are they being supported by the organisation since your appointment and going forward?
Well, I don't know that it's since my appointment particularly, but I mean, what there is I think that we have a good HR department which is doing a good job in difficult circumstances, and part of what they do is to ensure that people who are going through disciplinary processes are properly supported.
Thank you. I'm going to move to questions from members. I'll bring in Mr Halko-Johnson first.
Thank you very much, Kafina. Just a couple of quick questions. I'll maybe come back on some specifics a little bit later, if that's all right. I don't want to get too involved in the kind of individuals, but the Chief Executive, can you give us an update on the current Chief Executive's situation and future in terms of within the organisation or not?
Well, I can't really properly discuss individuals, but I can, I suppose, say that it's my opinion that Historic Environment Scotland needs a fully engaged Chief Executive, and it's certainly one of my priorities to ensure that the current situation is fully resolved so that we can say that it has proper leadership again.
Okay, and not relating to any individuals, but do you expect there to be changes, people leaving the organisation? And also, have you looked at perhaps how, as people leave, whether there'll be a requirement for redundancy payments or golden goodbyes for anybody? Have you set anything aside for that or considered that?
So there are a number of processes underway. I don't want, obviously, to prejudge any of them. It would surprise me if nobody left the organisation over the next few months. I'm not involved in the executive side of HES's work, and I can't give you any sensible answer on the question of redundancy payments, I'm afraid.
Thanks. So I'll maybe come back a little bit later, convener, onto some more kind of specific questions. But I was going to ask just one thing that the Cabinet Secretary said to us was relating to your role. You know, you will be obviously focused on getting the organisation back onto an even keel. Those are my words rather than his.
Yeah.
Do you have any kind of timescales that you're working to? Any targets that the government has set for you in terms of when you can bring that stability back? Have there been any kind of markers in when things are to improve by, or be resolved by? Let's put it that way.
No time deadlines have been set us by government, but clearly it's in everyone's interest that the current situation is dealt with as speedily as is practical, and that's my objective, certainly.
And just on a very last kind of point, on a very kind of practical basis, are you kind of in regular contact with the government? Is that being done through directly with HES? How's that work, the relationship?
I'm very glad to say that the support that I and we have received from government has been exemplary, really, and they've been immensely helpful to me in beginning my role at HES.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Mr Kerr.
Yeah, good morning, Sir Mark.
Good morning.
And Andrew Davis. I mean, clearly, I hope you get the feeling from our committee, which I don't think I'm speaking out of turn to say, is we wish you every best with solving this issue. But I don't think we can understate the severity of the seriousness of the situation in Historic Environment Scotland. The Section 22 report that the Auditor General has indicated that he will issue is pretty much a mayday signal from him in terms of the current status of Historic Environment Scotland. Effectively, what that means is the Auditor General is saying this public body is broken and Parliament and government must now act. You have how many days a week did you say you have?
2, but normally 1.
One day a week.
Well, it's actually, at the moment, I think 2 days a week. In normal times, it's 1 day a week.
It's one. And certainly you're a non-executive chairman. Would it not be more helpful if the government, if the Cabinet Secretary were more proactive in supporting you by sending in a truly independent person or a couple of people to conduct an inquiry on your behalf as to what has happened inside HES and what now needs to be done to right the organisation? Because with 1 day a week or 2 days a week, too much is being expected, surely, of you as a non-executive chairman.
Absolutely, and I don't think it's my role to conduct an investigation. But I welcome the Section 22 process. I think that the 3 areas of study which have been chosen by Audit Scotland are the right areas to study, and I'm sure that we're going to go through a rigorous and effective process to make sure that in those 3 areas we bottom out the problems. And I would say that that was an absolutely, unimpeachably independent inquiry, and I think it's very important that we concentrate on that. Whether or not we, at a later stage, need a broader inquiry into the culture at HES, and whether, and if so, how that can be changed, I'm not sure. I think it's very possible that we will, but my focus would be on the Section 22 inquiry at the moment.
When you say that is there an ongoing independent inquiry?
No. I mean, at the moment...
so there's no current inquiry into the broader issues related to the Section 22, but you're fully supportive, obviously, of the areas that the Auditor General has highlighted.
Yes.
So how will we proceed? How will this be tackled internally? Is there going to be someone from outside the organisation come in?
Do you mean to work with Audit Scotland?
Well, to address the very many issues highlighted in what will be the Section 22 report.
No, I think it's important that we first work with Audit Scotland to make sure that their study is as thorough and comprehensive as it can be, and that it results in findings which we can then act on.
But given the fact that HES clearly is an organisation in deep trouble, having the equivalent of a nervous breakdown, that there needs to be some kind of external intervention. Would it not be better if there was an appointed independent investigation?
But I think that the Section 22 investigation is exactly an independent investigation, and I think it's looking at the right areas.
All right. The papers that we were given in advance of this committee reveal some extraordinary things that had not been previously put into the public domain. So, for example, it's revealed that on the 2nd of June this year, documentation entitled, in our papers, HES corruption volumes, and they're given numbers, 1 and so forth, were circulated to ministers, the board, and Audit Scotland. There was another set as lately as last month of these HES corruption volumes. The Scottish Government in June asked the board to investigate these allegations. Did that investigation happen, to your knowledge?
It's underway at the moment.
When did it start?
When did it start? I don't know, because I wasn't here at the time. Do you know when it started? Yeah.
A month into your role, and asking these sorts of questions is quite difficult. So can I turn to Andrew Davis? Because you were a member of the board, obviously. You've been on the board of HES for a lot longer than the few weeks that Sir Mark has been the chairman. What happened when the Scottish Government asked the board to conduct investigation into these so-called HES corruption volumes?
So the board appointed one of the members of the Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee to lead an investigation into these allegations. Obviously, as each one came in, that was added to the investigation. So that investigation is still ongoing. I believe it started in June, but I don't have the exact dates, and it may have been early July that investigation began. So there was an immediate investigation launched. Who did you say was conducting the investigation? One of the board members, or one of the ARAC board members.
So, and it was an internal investigation, and you hasn't reached any conclusions yet.
It hasn't completed yet, no.
Are you aware of what is contained within these volumes?
I'm aware of what is contained within them.
And what was your part in initiating the inquiry? Did you have a role to play in any of this? Can you just explain?
As a member of the board.
As a member of the board. Okay. Can I ask you, Sir Mark, how many of the current board and how many of the senior management, no names, but how many of them are currently suspended?
Well, no members of the board are suspended. The senior management, well, it's difficult for me to give a figure, and I might well be wrong, but I mean, I think that the current figure is 2.
So there are 2 members, so no members of the board, but 2 senior managers are currently suspended. Can I ask you about the 4-month period, at least 4-month period, where Historic Environment Scotland has had no accountable officer because of, well, just revisiting suspension, I think I have to say that it has been widely reported that the Chief Executive is suspended. Is that correct? Can you say?
No, that isn't correct. The Chief Executive and Accountable Officer is, in fact, currently working on the conclusion of the accounts for this year, and will in due course be signing that off so that it can be submitted to Parliament.
So Cat Brown, recently returned to work.
She's at work now, yeah.
So there's no suggestion that Cat Brown has been suspended at any time from her duties as CEO?
I really can't comment on individuals in this way, but what I can say is that Katarina Brown is not suspended.
All right. So there has not been a period then?
I'm sorry, I can't go on. It's a difficult line for me to keep to, but I'm not really able to answer questions about individual members of staff.
My concern...
Stephen, I'll just stop you and just say that it would not be appropriate for the committee to become involved in individual staffing issues.
Well, it is very relevant because the Chief Executive Officer is the accountable officer, and under in terms of the requirements of the Scottish Public Finance Manual, there has to be an accountable officer in the organisation.
But you've been assured that that person is in post and working.
Well, that's why I'm asking.
Need to leave it
that's
there.
why I'm asking. It's highly relevant to an organisation that's in receipt of over £70 million of public money. Is there an accountable officer? And I'm trying to ascertain whether or not there was indeed an accountable officer in HES during the period when the Chief Executive Officer, I think, is recognised, without going into personal details, has not been present at work. Andrew Davis, has there been an accountable officer in Hess during the time?
I believe the accountable officer is an appointment of the Scottish Government, and therefore I'm not sure that as board members we should necessarily be speaking to what is a Scottish Government appointment.
All right, so it's the responsibility of the Cabinet Secretary to see that there's an accountable officer in Hess.
It's not the board's responsibility.
It's not the board's responsibility. All right. Some freedom of information requests have shown that the Hess HR department removed an independent investigator's recommendation of an urgent culture review after staff reported a, quote, culture of fear and, quote, fear of retribution. The Auditor General has now flagged culture as a material concern alongside these so-called Hess corruption volumes. Can I ask Andrew Davis, because it's not fair to ask Sir Mark some of these questions, and I acknowledge that. Can I ask Andrew Davis, who's been a director at Hess for some time, why was this recommendation for a culture review deleted from the investigator's report? I'm quoting FOI information. Yes, of course.
Attempt to answer it. It hasn't been deleted in, I think, the sense in which you're suggesting. A process is underway. That recommendation did not belong in the document, which was germane to that process. But there will be, and is already beginning, a proper investigation into the matters which we're talking about. So it's entirely misleading to suggest that the HR department in some way was covering up a recommendation. It's simply pursuing the recommendations in a rational order, and that particular recommendation has to come at the end of the process, not at the beginning.
But there was a recommendation for an urgent review of culture that was part of the independent investigator's recommendations.
So we have to deal with the individual processes first before going on to a wider review, and that's the reason why it wasn't in the document.
But these issues have been hanging over the Historic Environment Scotland for a very long time, and there doesn't seem to have been any action to address these concerns. I mean, there is a catalogue of concerns. Some of them are in the public domain, some of them are not, but some of us in this committee have become privy to them through whistleblowers.
Yes,
I am deeply concerned that there isn't an urgent approach to tackling the culture issues inside Hess. I'm not sure that it's fair to expect Audit Scotland to be the independent investigator in these matters, although you rightly highlight that that is one of the points mentioned in the Section 22 report remit. There needs to be something more fundamental done, and that I'm putting to you, Sir Mark, as the new broom.
Yes, and I agree with you.
There needs to be someone that comes in and deals with these issues that's not part of the organisation currently, and has no particular dog in the fight, because there has been a lot of dog fighting in Hess over the period of probably more than a year.
I agree with you. I'm not disagreeing. I think that you're right. I simply think that it's sensible to try and do this in order. We have a limited resource, and we have to devote that resource fully to the Section 22 investigation, and then I think that we almost certainly need to move on to another stage, which also needs to be independent, which will, I expect, look at ways in which HES can really make a fresh start, both in terms of the way that it's structured and in terms of the behaviours that it exhibits. So, I mean, I think that wider bit of work will need to follow on from the conclusion of the Section 22 study.
and what you said earlier was the future almost certainly, in answer to Jamie Halker-Johnson's question, it's almost certain that some people are going to have to leave Hess in order for that to happen. But I wonder if I can tempt you to answer this very simple question. Would it be helpful in terms of resource, because you mentioned resource specifically, and we haven't talked about the current finances of Hess yet either, would it be helpful to you as the new chair of Hess if the Cabinet Secretary were to resource an independent investigation, independent of the Scottish Government, independent of Hess? Would it be useful to you in your work in terms of the charge that Angus Robertson has given you as the new chairman of Hess if Angus Robertson were to initiate that form of an independent inquiry, dealing primarily with the whole culture of the organisation?
So, as I've said, the Cabinet Secretary has been extremely supportive, both to me personally and to Hess as an organisation. I think that it's too early for me to say what I think the form of the wider study needs to be. I mean, I'm agreeing that there does need to be such a thing. But I think that when we come to that point, the question of how we resource it will certainly arise, and I'm hoping that the government will support us at that stage. But I'm not saying that we have any specific request at the moment.
And two last questions to Andrew Davis, a convener, before I give way. And those questions have got to do with how many times in the last 4.5 years have the board, Hess board, met with the Cabinet Secretary for Culture? How many times have you had a meeting as a board with the Cabinet Secretary for Culture?
I'm not aware of any.
No meetings at all? There's been no meetings between Angus Robertson and the board?
Not that I'm aware of.
Right. Okay, that's quite an interesting, I think, and revealing statement in and of itself. And in terms of the current finances, there has been public discussion of a shortfall currently of between £4.5 and £5 million in terms of the current year budget. Can you bring us up to speed as to where the finances are for Hess?
Yeah. So the half-year finances are in balance. The overall income is up 9% year on year, which is part of the new business model to try and drive up commercial income. So that's commercial income is up 9% year on year. The plan, it's slightly behind where we would like it to be. Expenditure is up 7%. So we're broadly in balance with where we would expect to be, running a significant surplus at this time of year, but that is expected because it's the peak of the summer season and the income streams. Mm. The expectation is that we will be in balance at the end of the year. I have a paper coming to my Finance Committee next week, which will look at the forecast for the rest of the year. When I look at the balance of risks and opportunities for the rest of the year, I think there are slightly more in the way of opportunities than there are of risks. So I'm very comfortable with the position of the finances as they stand and for the projection for the full year.
And the new business model predates Cat Brown's appointment, is that correct?
It straddles, I think. So a lot of the work was done under Alec, and then the final agreements were made under Cat.
Okay, thank you.
I wonder, before we move to the next member, if I could ask a question. The Scottish Government sponsorship team have been attending the board since May. I wonder if you could give us a bit of information about what their role is. Is that purely observational, or have they been able to offer any support and advice to the board at this time? That's probably not for yourself, Sir Mark, given the timescale you've been in.
Yes, so the SG have been able to offer advice, guidance and a perspective from themselves in board meetings.
Thank you very much. Can I move to Dr Allen, please?
Thanks very much, Convener, and good morning, Sir Mark. While this activity that you've just described is underway, obviously the work of HES is important. You alluded to it in your opening statement how important your organisation's work is to communities up and down the country. So I'm interested to know, while this change of culture is taking place, what's being done to build community confidence in the work you do. I'm thinking specifically of the fact that, and you have made some progress on this, I should say, that 5% of sites are still closed and many others only have partial access. So how is the organisation balancing this reflection that you've described with the work of actually reopening sites?
Yes. So, as you say, many of our properties were closed because of issues to do with high-level masonry posing a risk to visitors. And as you also say, now 95% are open, not all of them fully open, but 95% are open. And clearly our hope and intention is to continue that process, because it's very important that as near as possible all our sites should be fully open. And that is part of the contribution that we make, well, obviously to the preservation of these sites, but also to the tourist or tourism economy throughout Scotland. This media storm about Historic Environment Scotland is undoubtedly disturbing to everyone who works there. Nevertheless, I think that most people are continuing to work very much at full stretch, and that we are continuing to make progress on the issues which you've mentioned.
So is there a plan now in place? I appreciate that you can't have every site open all the time for reasons of conservation work and all sorts of things, but is there a plan now in place that you've got confidence will be enacted to ensure that there are something closer to 100% sites open?
Yes, that's very much something which is in process, and I'm confident that we're making good progress on that.
Okay, thank you, Convener.
Thank you. Mr Harvey.
Thank you very much. Good morning. There have clearly been many aspects of the range of issues that have been reported in the press, different dimensions of the situation at HES, and all of which will have compounded in terms of damaging the public trust in the organisation and its reputation. I want to move on to the allegations of racism. You'll be aware, I'm sure, that we're in a very dangerous time at the moment as a society, with overt racism as well as other forms of prejudice, anti-immigrant prejudice, homophobia, transphobia, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, being normalised at a very, very high level. It's hugely important that a public organisation, and in particular one which has a role of telling Scotland's story of itself to us and to the world, takes these issues very, very seriously. Now, I'm obviously not going to press you to get involved in the inappropriate issues around individual staff management, but can I first of all ask whether you have rejected the accuracy of any of the media reports that have been published in relation to this, in relation to allegations of racism, and in particular into the damage that those allegations have done to your relationship with Glasgow University, who it's reported have suspended a joint project you're working with them on in relation to slavery and empire. Are those media reports accurate, or have you challenged their accuracy?
I can't honestly speak to the entire range of media reports, but I mean, I think that broadly they're accurate, yeah. I'm aware, I think, of two allegations of racism, one which I think occurred a year and a bit ago, and one of which was a bit more recent than that. We have taken both of those very seriously, and in one case, the situation was dealt with, and in the other case, there's live investigation, which has not yet concluded.
I'm sorry, could you speak up a little?
Sorry, so there is a live investigation which has not yet concluded.
Okay.
Excuse me.
I mean, there are two aspects to what I want to ask you about. One is about the accuracy, particularly in terms of the suggestion that it's damaged or ended a relationship that you had with Glasgow University on a project around slavery and empire. Do you know whether that is accurate, whether there is the potential to repair the damage to the organisation's reputation so that work like that can recommence? The second aspect, you can't answer.
I'm afraid I don't know.
I wonder if it would be possible for you to follow up in writing to let us know the status of that work. It's an issue which this committee has previously been interested in. And secondly, I would like to ask how you're able to reassure us, and by doing so reassure the public, that as an organisation you will have a zero-tolerance attitude to racism and other forms of prejudice, bearing in mind the special responsibility that all public bodies have, but also that an organisation with your particular role in relation to expressing something of Scotland's essential identity and character and story. How are you able to reassure us of that?
Well, all I can say is that it's very clear that the board and the organisation as a whole are committed to zero tolerance of any of the forms of prejudice or discrimination that you referred to.
Zero tolerance to me would mean that those who have been found to have expressed racist views or attitudes would no longer have a role in the organisation. Is that your understanding of what the phrase zero tolerance means?
No, that's not my understanding. My understanding is that what it means is that wherever it's encountered, it will be dealt with appropriately.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr Bibby.
Good morning, Sir Mark and Mr Davis. And first of all, reiterate what other members have said about acknowledging you're new to the role and wishing you well with resolving the very many issues that there are in the organisation, but also to make clear that I think we do need to see decisive action taken quickly to resolve these issues. Just following on from Mr Harvey's point about responding to media reports, in our Spice briefing today, actually, helpfully points out there's been a range of media reports that we're aware of that have highlighted concerns over governance issues and internal culture at HES. At the time of writing, HES has not published a formal response or statement on any of these issues on the news sections of its website. So given that everything that's been in the public domain, given all the issues and allegations, why do you think that is? That as an organisation that is facing so many allegations and concerns and issues, that it hasn't published on its website a response to the very many issues that there have been? Has that been a deliberate strategy? What does that say about the culture of HES that there has been no response to any of these allegations put on the website?
I'm not clear that there has been no response. I mean, I know that we have been in touch with the different media organisations and that we have certainly tried to correct stories where they're incorrect.
But nothing on the website, Mark.
Right. Well, I mean, I don't think I really have a good answer to you, except that I will take that away with me and I'll try to get back to you on it.
Yeah, thank you, because I think one of the issues I'll come back to is the need for openness and transparency and the need to address the very many issues there are, because we have, as has been said, we've seen allegations of racism, other impropriety, concerns about financial mismanagement. We've seen concerns about a culture of fear, a culture of spin, a culture of secrecy. And we've used the word culture a lot. I mean, it's clear to me, I think, we do need to see a review of the culture, and as Mr Kerr said, an independent review of the culture within HES. You mentioned earlier that a cultural review not take place until the individual processes were resolved. When do you expect those individual processes to be resolved?
Over the next couple of months.
Next couple of months. And in terms of, do you not think now that Audit Scotland are doing their Section 22 report, and obviously Audit Scotland are taking that intervention, Parliament are asking questions, do you not think that HES should be ordering its own independent cultural review?
I do,
No.
but I think that we should do that after we've concluded our work with Audit Scotland on the Section 22 inquiry.
Do you not think, though, do you not think that Audit Scotland, though, if it's looking at the culture of the organisation, that to show that HES was actually turning a corner on trying to address these issues themselves, actually HES ordering its own independent cultural review may assist with that Audit Scotland inquiry?
I think I take your point, but I also think that I'm non-executive. Nevertheless, I can't help but notice that we have a very small number of staff trying to deal with a large number of issues. I think that to launch an inquiry which runs in parallel with the Section 22 inquiries simply wouldn't be practical in terms of the amount of resource that it would take. And it isn't just a question of bringing in more resource from outside. We need the people who are actually in the organisation and familiar with the way it works to be able to participate fully. So my opinion as someone who has some experience of organisations of this kind is that we need to take things in order, because we can only resource it properly if we do that.
Okay. Well, I think when you're trying to find a solution to any problem, you need to understand that problem first. And I do think, in terms of having that cultural review and addressing the issues, then that does need to happen as soon as possible. I want to go back to the issue about transparency, and this does very much relate to the Parliament and scrutiny by the Parliament. I asked a question in September to Alison Turnbull from HES. I asked, I understand in June 2024 HES budgeted for a 2% pay increase, despite the Scottish Government having set out public sector pay policy just 2 months before that suggested an increase of 3% in public sector pay. Is that correct? Is that your understanding? What does that say about your organisation's financial planning? If not, if it's not adhering to the Scottish Government's pay policy? The response was, we do adhere to the Scottish Government's pay policy. I'm not aware of the instance that you mentioned. We will get back to you on that. HES came back in a letter after the meeting and gave us a one-line response on that to say, for 2025-26, HES budgeted a 3% annual cost of living pay increase in line with Scottish Government pay policy. Now, that may predate your time, Sir Mark. Could I ask you, Mr Davis, did HES at any point budget for a 2% pay increase in 25-26?
No. The 3% was the budget. The 2% figure to which you are referring was part of a financial strategy paper, which was work that had been ongoing for some time and looked at sensitivities for the new financial model. So there was a 2% figure. It's not made up, but it was not the budgeted figure. So the budget was based on a 3% figure.
So, a couple of follow-up questions on that. My understanding was that a presentation was given to senior managers in August of this year, referencing that 2% increase, the 3% increase in public sector policy. Why, when I asked that question and we got a follow-up letter, did we not get the response that you just gave me there? Why did the committee just get a one-liner saying we'd always adhered to a 3% policy and not talked about the financial strategy being 2%?
I'm sorry, I couldn't tell you exactly why that answer was the one that was given.
Well, I could make, in terms of, I certainly can't. I'm obviously here to ask questions on behalf of the committee, but there does appear My original question was about financial management and financial strategies, and clearly budgeting for 2% and then increasing for 3% suggests the financial strategy in place wasn't sufficient because it's had to increase to 3%. That was my original question. My subsequent question today is not only are there issues about financial management in that regard, there's also issues about transparency and the fact when Parliament's asking for questions in relation to the financial strategy and public sector pay, that we're given one-line answers that don't go into what clearly was an increase in budget for public sector pay that wasn't originally budgeted for. You may not be able to comment on the specifics, but there are clearly concerns about financial management and transparency in an organisation. Would you agree with that?
To be honest, I don't think I would. I think within the organisation, we were clear at Finance Committee and at Board as to what assumptions were being made. When we look at things, obviously, any assumption you make in financial modelling is simply that, an assumption. And
you don't think there's any issues with transparency when you get when the HES provide a one-line answer that doesn't go into the extent of the answer that you just gave me? You don't think there's any issues with
your question was. I thought your question was within the organisation, which I was answering. So I think you had an answer to the specific question. I wasn't.
Didn't answer the premise of my question.
If it didn't answer the premise of your question, then we must apologise for that. I hope you've got a clear answer now.
Yeah. I've got a clear answer now. I don't have a clear answer on the issues around transparency and the culture around transparency in HES. I think it actually raises more questions than answers, given what I've also previously said about the issues around statements on websites. I'll leave it there just now, Camille.
Yeah, I think Mr Kerr's got a small supplementary.
I do. Thank you, Convener, for your indulgence. I want to go back to Stephen Boyle's letter to me on Friday, in which he said, I am concerned that Historic Environment Scotland has operated without an accountable officer for an extended period. I'm unclear now, based on what I've heard this morning, in relation to the Chief Executive Officer of HES. She was not in the business and therefore there was no accountable officer. Is that right, Andrew Davis? You went a length of time,
there was an
extended period, it says.
There was a period of time when the Chief Executive Officer was out of the business and was still the nominated accountable officer.
But Stephen Boyle says you were operating without an accountable officer. He's correct, isn't he? It's one of the bases for Section 22.
I think his premise probably is. I think it's technical whether she was still the accountable. I couldn't tell you whether she was still the accountable officer.
Well, clearly not.
What she wasn't was in the business.
Well, clearly not, because in Audit Scotland's letter, it's one of the issues that is highlighted as being promoting the need for a Section 22, which is an extreme measure on the part of the Auditor General. Did the Board discuss at any time during the period when the CEO was out of the business that you were operating without an accountable officer? I already referred earlier to the Scottish Public Finance Manual. Was that an issue you discussed?
Did the Board discuss it? Yes. Is it a matter for the Board? No, it's a matter for Scottish Government.
Did you seek to communicate with the Scottish Government about the issue of the lack of an accountable officer? Did you communicate with them? Did you point out to them? Did you ask for a new accountable officer?
So as far as I am aware, Scottish Government was fully appraised of the position of the accountable officer.
By the Board?
By the Board and by the Chief Executive.
By the Chief Executive?
Yes. That is a requirement upon her which she fulfilled.
Right.
To keep the Scottish Government informed because, as I say, as her role as accountable officer, is one that reports to the Scottish Government, not to the board, and therefore she appropriately was contacting Scottish Government.
Yes. And you, the board, you and the board, were saying to the Scottish Government, we don't have an accountable officer, we understand what the regulation and requirement is, we don't have one, will you give us one? That is what your request was it?
That is not a role for the board.
So what did you do, just point out you don't have one and not say we need one?
It's not.
It was understood that you were saying we need an accountable officer because we don't have one in the business?
It is not for the board to determine who and how the accountable officer.
No, I'm not saying who should be the accountable officer. I'm just saying, did you ask the Scottish Government for an accountable officer because the accountable officer was out of the business for an extended period, to use Stephen Boyle's words?
No, we did not ask them because it is not our role as a board to appoint.
So when you were pointing it out that there wasn't an accountable officer, why were you doing that then, if it's nothing to do with you? You're aware of the requirements under the Scottish Public Finance Manual. You were pointing out, presumably on the basis that you thought you should have one, no?
We communicate regularly with Scottish Government, and Scottish Government are in the board, were at this stage in the board meetings.
You're dancing around my question. It's a very simple question. Did you ask the Scottish Government to appoint an accountable officer?
No, we did not. It is not the role of the board to
But you did point it out to them. So presumably there's a written communication or a minute somewhere that says, we're pointing out to you formally that we don't have an accountable officer.
I couldn't tell you whether there is exactly that.
Really?
It's
a big deal not having an accountable officer. It's a big enough deal that the Auditor General has issued a Section 22 report.
But it is not the board's responsibility. It is not our business.
But you don't know as a director whether or not there was that kind of communication on this huge issue. I'm really surprised at that, I have to say. My last question is to Sir Mark.
If I could just say, I think we've had the answer we're going to get, but
I agree.
We can ask if there is such a minute, or if it was discussed, if the committee could be informed of that after today's session.
Thank you, Convener. And my last question is to Sir Mark, which is, there have been a lot of whistleblowers, and I should declare an interest and make it clear in reference to my register of interest that I am someone who passionately believes in the importance of a culture where people can speak up. And yet, interestingly, some of the public comments, even from a trade union leader, have been disparaging towards people that have had the courage to speak up. Can I ask you to affirm, as the chairman of HES, that you understand the importance of whistleblowers and that you have no negative view of people in a situation where they feel they have no internal recourse to reaching out to a person who is appropriate for them to speak to under the Public Interest Disclosure Act to share their concerns and ask that person to do something on their behalf? Can I ask you to affirm that you personally and on behalf of the organisation actively would encourage people to speak up?
Well, I'm clear that it's important that people should be able to whistleblow when they feel that that is the recourse available to them, and that they're not satisfied with the normal internal processes. Yes, absolutely. I think it's clearly important that people should feel able to do that.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Convener. Just a few more kind of questions. I'd like to go back to the former the chief executive. So, Mark, are you aware of, or perhaps Andrew Davis may be aware of any actions that have to be taken to accommodate Katerina Murray coming back, albeit just to sign off the accounts or work on the accounts?
I'm afraid I really don't think I can or should discuss the details of an individual's working arrangements. Okay.
Katerina Murray said posted on LinkedIn, and it was quite widely reported in the media, sometimes we need a wee reminder and then a post, the story depends on who's telling it. I was just wondering what role Catriona Murray will play or is playing in any changes within the organisation, any investigations, inquiries, etc.
The situation is one in which I can't really comment on what's going to happen in the future, because in order to do that, I'd have to have information which I don't yet have, because there are processes underway which need to conclude before I could make any answer to that.
Okay. And just on timescales, I'm sorry if I missed it, but you are in the process of recruiting or appointing an interim chief operating officer. Do you know how long that's going to take? Have you got candidates that already are being considered? Is it likely to be, I take it to be somebody external rather than internal?
I think it's likely to be somebody external. I don't have a timetable. I would expect it to take weeks rather than months. It's something that we're moving on as quickly as we can.
Okay. And my last question, which is slightly different. You answered some questions with Dr. Allen on kind of closures. There's, I mean, you'll appreciate all of this that's happening as a great distraction from the work of the organisation. I've had raised with me a case of, albeit a slightly smaller example, I get the pronunciation wrong, the Not Nagale stone, which is a Pictish, over 1,000-year-old carving that's being, or it's being alleged is not being looked after properly. A colleague of mine has written to Highland Council about it. It's under their care, although your responsibility. No action's been taken in the month. I guess with everything that's going on, is there a concern that at the moment some of the kind of bread and butter day-to-day things, which I know aren't your responsibility, but some of those things that are there, that actually HES are there to do, which is to protect our heritage, aren't being done because of this, because there's so much going on in other parts of the organisation. And at the moment, the organisation is it, in your opinion, fit for purpose in doing that primary job of protecting Scotland's heritage?
Yeah, I believe that HES continues to do a good job in that kind of, in its primary role, and that the whole range of work that we do to protect sites, to promote the restoration of historic buildings, to look after HES's own, 300 sites and so on, that all of that is continuing and that it's being done well. I don't know about the particular thing which you refer to, and I'd be glad to look into it. Certainly, it is part of our role to be aware of any threat to ancient monuments or scheduled sites. Yeah. Okay.
I would be very impressed if you were aware of it, but I mean, I think the point is there that there is so much going on that the concern is that perhaps attention may not be on some of these day-to-day operations, and
I'm keenly looking forward to making the kinds of visits which would enable me to answer you more fully and more sensibly, but I haven't been able to start that yet.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Commissioner.
Adam?
Everyone, apologies to everyone for me being a wee bit later, but I might have been as well not coming because there seems to be more we can't ask you than we can actually ask you, and you can understand how concerning and frustrating that'll be for us, and I suspect for yourselves as well, not being able to give us straight answers. But Sir Mark, when you first got this role and you had to kind of deal with the issues, you said your first public statement was, "My priorities as chair will ensure the organisation can build on the recent successes and retain the trust of the public and our partners." Can I ask, how are you going to do that in light of how public all the kind of allegations that have been made regarding the organisation, not going into individual kind of things, but how are you going to regain that? Because it's a case of regaining that trust after the kind of everything that's happened, but very publicly.
I think that the route to that is, first of all, to ensure that the investigations which are currently underway are concluded and that the issues in question are dealt with, and that the public can see that they have been dealt with and dealt with effectively. I think that's one aspect to it. I think another aspect to it is strengthening the management of the organisation so that people can see that it's well led. And I think that if we get those two things right, we can begin on the process of turning attention from the kinds of issues that have predominated in the media recently to the kinds of issues which obviously I would prefer to concentrate on, which is the good work that HES does in really looking after and making policy on the historic environment.
So, Mark, your own record speaks for itself anyway, and you're dealing with the situation now to try and fix it. But one of the other things you said in that statement was openness, transparency and good governance is the heart of everything we do. Now, that's important. Can I get this commitment now? And I think you've hinted towards it, that as you go through with this process, we, the committee, will be able to kind of keep the information and be involved in that. Because, like you, we want you to succeed. You know, so at the end of the day, but the problem is you're a public organisation and there's been these allegations made and it's been very public and we have to find a way to get to the other end. So with the openness and transparency at the heart of everything you're doing, can we ensure that the committee is involved in that as well?
Yes, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that exhausts questions from the committee this morning. So Mark and Mr Davis, thank you very much for your attendance this morning. I'm going to suspend for 5 minutes. Thank you.